Have you heard about these countries that were erased from the map? Picture this. You're sitting in an airport, passport in hand. You've done everything right, booked the ticket, packed your bags, said goodbye to your family. You've even got an official government document with your name on it, your photograph, a stamp of authority from a ministry, an embossed seal. And the officer at the desk looks at your passport, looks at it again, and hands it back to you. This isn't a real country, he says. You know that isn't true. You were born there. Your parents were born there. Your government collects taxes. Your currency buys bread. Your army patrols a border. Your president gave a speech last week. You went to school, you got a driver's license, you paid your electricity bill, all inside a country that, by every measure of daily life, exists completely. But the airport officer isn't wrong, either. Because on every official map produced by the United Nations, the body that decides which countries are real, your home does not exist. It is a blank. A silence. A white space in the cartography of the world. There are tens of millions of people living in that blank right now. Who are they? Where are they? And how does a country become invisible, not to the people who live in it, but to everyone else? That's what we're here to find out. Before we go further, if this is the kind of story that makes you stop scrolling, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find it. Subscribe if you want to keep getting notifications on our next uploads. And drop a comment below, which of these territories did you already know about, and which one surprised you? Share this with someone who thinks they know how the world works. Let's see if they do. Let's start with a question that seems simple until you try to answer it. What makes a country real? Most people, if they thought about it, would say something like, a government, a population, a territory, and the ability to interact with other states. That's actually close to the legal answer. In 1933, at a conference in Montevideo, Uruguay, the nations of the Americas signed a convention that defined exactly this, what international lawyers still call the Montevideo criteria. A state needs a permanent population, a defined territory, an effective government, and the capacity to enter into relations with other states. By those criteria, the entity you're about to meet clears every bar. Somaliland. Horn of Africa. Population, somewhere between 4 and 5 million people, depending on which estimate you use, because no internationally verified census has ever been conducted there, itself a symptom of the problem. The government sits in a city called Hargeisa. It has a constitution, approved by referendum. It has its own currency, the Somaliland shilling. It has held multiple democratic elections, certified by international observers as free and fair, in a region of the world where that is genuinely rare. It has a military, a police force, a court system, taxes, a foreign ministry that sends diplomats to meet with foreign governments, and zero United Nations recognition. Zero. Not a single UN member state, out of 193, formally recognizes the Republic of Somaliland as a sovereign country. Pause on that for a moment. Because it means something stranger than it sounds. It doesn't mean Somaliland doesn't work. It works. It means that when Somaliland applies for membership in international organizations, the African Union, the International Monetary Fund, the World Health Organization, the door is simply closed. Not because they failed a test. Because they're not on the list. And the list, it turns out, is everything. To understand why some countries are invisible, you have to understand how the visible ones got on the map. Go back to 1648. The Peace of Westphalia. 2 treaties signed in the German cities of Osnabrück and Munster, ending 30 years of war that had consumed much of Europe. The key invention of Westphalia wasn't a weapon or a technology, it was a concept. The concept of sovereignty. The idea that a recognized government has exclusive authority over a defined piece of territory, and other governments have no right to interfere inside that territory. For 3 centuries, that framework held, imperfectly, violently, with constant exceptions, but it held. Empires rose and fell, colonies were carved out and carved up, but the basic architecture of international order was sovereignty. Then came 1945. The United Nations. And the architects of the post-war world tried to make the framework permanent. The UN Charter did something ambitious. It tried to write the rules of international order into binding law. Article 2(4) said you cannot violate the territorial integrity of a member state. That sounds clear. But Article 1(2) said peoples have the right of self-determination. That also sounds clear. The problem is they contradict each other. If a people inside an existing state want to break away and form their own country, which principle wins? The territorial integrity of the state they're in? Or their right to self-determination? The UN Charter doesn't say. It never resolved the contradiction. And in that gap, in that silence in the law, is where all these countries live. The architects of the post-war order made a pragmatic choice. They decided that the right to self-determination mostly applied to overseas colonies, peoples separated from their European rulers by an ocean. Free the colonies. But don't allow existing states to be carved up from the inside. International lawyers call this the saltwater thesis. If the ocean separates you from your colonizer, you have a right to independence. If you're landlocked inside an existing country, even if you're a distinct people with a different language, religion, history, and culture, you don't. The result of that choice is still being lived by tens of millions of people today. In 1963, leaders from newly independent African nations gathered in Addis Ababa to found the Organization of African Unity. They faced an immediate crisis. The borders they'd inherited from European colonialism were, to put it delicately, absurd. The 1884 Berlin Conference, where European powers had divided the African continent among themselves at a table in Germany, with barely an African voice in the room, had drawn lines that cut across ethnic groups, tribes, language communities, and kingdoms that had existed for centuries. A river that was someone's homeland became a border. A mountain range that a people had lived on both sides of for generations was now two different countries. The OAU leaders knew this. They said so. But they also recognized the terrifying implication of the alternative. If you start redrawing colonial borders based on ethnic and historical claims, you don't get a few adjustments. You get an unraveling. Dozens of claims, counterclaims, wars. So in 1964, the OAU issued the Cairo Declaration. Colonial borders, however arbitrary, however historically wrong, would be frozen. Inviolable. Permanent. It was a decision made for stability. And in some ways, it worked. Africa did not fragment the way some feared. But it also locked in a paradox that produces conflict to this day. Peoples divided by colonial borders had no recognized legal mechanism to seek unity. Peoples lumped together by colonial borders had no recognized legal mechanism to separate. And the most striking case of all, the case that makes the legal argument for Somaliland genuinely unique, is Somaliland itself. Here's what makes Somaliland different from almost every other unrecognized territory in the world. In 1960, British Somaliland became independent, a real, recognized, UN member state, free from colonial rule. 5 days later, it voluntarily merged with Italian Somalia to form the Somali Republic. It gave up its sovereignty, willingly, in pursuit of a pan-Somali dream. The dream soured. Decades of misrule followed. And in 1991, when the Somali state collapsed entirely, when dictator Syed Barre fell and the country descended into the chaos that would make Somalia a byword for failed statehood, the people of the North said, "We want out. We want what we gave up in 1960. We want to UN merge." That is a legally unusual argument. Somaliland isn't a secessionist movement claiming a right it never had. It's a former sovereign state asking to return to the sovereignty it voluntarily surrendered. No African Union member has been willing to say yes. Because if Somaliland's argument succeeds, the Cairo Declaration begins to crack. And behind it, other claims are waiting. On the other side of the planet, the late 1980s produced a different kind of problem. The Soviet Union was coming apart. When it finally dissolved in December 1991, the international community moved quickly to recognize the 15 former Soviet republics as independent states. Russia, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, the Baltic states. All 15 recognized. But within those 15 new states, other regions had also been declaring independence. Regions that had been given their own administrative status inside the Soviet system, autonomous republics, oblasts, regions, that now wanted the same freedom the Soviet republics themselves had claimed. Nagorno-Karabakh, inside Azerbaijan, was majority Armenian. Abkhazia and South Ossetia, inside Georgia, wanted out of Georgia. Transnistria, inside Moldova, wanted to remain aligned with Russia rather than with a Moldova that was drifting toward Romania and the West. The international community said no to all of them. The 15 Soviet republics were recognized. Their internal borders became international borders. And the regions inside those borders, even if they had already fought wars, even if they had already set up functioning governments, were told they did not qualify. The result was what diplomats call frozen conflicts. Not resolved. Not defeated. Frozen. For 30 years, Nagorno-Karabakh existed in a kind of suspended reality. It called itself the Republic of Artsakh. It had a president, a parliament, a military. It controlled territory it had won in a brutal war in the early 1990s. Armenia backed it, supplied it, treated it as essentially part of Armenia, while never formally annexing it. Azerbaijan insisted it was Azerbaijani territory, occupied. And then, on September 19, 2023, Azerbaijan launched what it called anti-terrorist measures. 24 hours later, it was over. The Republic of Artsakh, a de facto state that had existed for 3 decades, was gone. Within days, more than 100,000 ethnic Armenians fled the territory. One of the fastest complete population displacements in recent history. A frozen conflict, unfrozen, not by negotiation, not by diplomacy, but by military force. Nagorno-Karabakh is what happens to an unrecognized state when the geopolitical winds shift. When the patron can no longer protect. When the freeze thaws. Not every unrecognized state ends this way. But none of them can rule it out. Cyprus. A Mediterranean island, warm, beautiful, historically led, the crossroads of ancient civilizations. Today, it is also quietly one of the most absurd political situations on earth. Drive from the southern part of the island to the northern part. You will cross a line, the Green Line, as it's called, that has divided Cyprus since 1974. On the southern side, the Republic of Cyprus, a UN member state, an EU member, using the euro. On the northern side, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. The TRNC, as it's known, has been there since November 15, 1983, when it declared independence unilaterally. It has a president, a parliament, a constitution, elections, universities, hotels, a functioning economy. Its passport is accepted in exactly one country, Turkey. The story of how the island got cut in half is tangled and bitter. In 1974, a coup backed by the Greek military junta attempted to annex Cyprus to Greece. Turkey, citing its rights as a guarantor power under the 1960 constitution, responded with a military intervention. Turkish troops occupied the northern third of the island. Roughly 160,000 Greek Cypriots fled south. Roughly 45,000 Turkish Cypriots moved north. The island was divided. Families were separated. Properties were abandoned. 9 years later, the Turkish Cypriot leader Rauf Denktaş declared independence. The UN Security Council immediately called the declaration legally invalid. Every country in the world except Turkey refused to recognize it. Denktaş spent the rest of his life, he died in 2012, negotiating, arguing, insisting that his people had a right to a state of their own. He was a lawyer by training, sharp and stubborn, and he believed that the Greek Cypriots had made reunification impossible by insisting on terms that would erase Turkish Cypriot autonomy entirely. The most serious attempt at reunification came in 2004. The Annan Plan, named for UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan, proposed a bizonal, bicommunal federation. Both communities would vote on it in a referendum. Turkish Cypriots voted yes. 65% in favor. Greek Cypriots voted no, 76% against. And so Cyprus remained divided. And 3 days after the referendum, the Republic of Cyprus, the Greek Cypriot South, joined the European Union. Without reunification. Which means the European Union now has an external border running through the middle of the island it officially considers entirely its member states' territory. The TRNC population are EU citizens in theory, because the EU considers them Cypriot, but they can't participate in EU institutions because their government isn't recognized. They hold Turkish passports, which gives them visa-free access to Turkey and some Turkish allied countries, but complications at EU borders. It is, in every practical sense, a passport trap. There is a territory in Africa where people have been waiting for a referendum for more than 30 years. Western Sahara. A vast, largely desert territory on the northwest coast of Africa, the size of the United Kingdom, sandwiched between Morocco, Algeria, and Mauritania. Spain colonized it. Spain left in 1975. And then Morocco marched in. In November 1975, King Hassan II of Morocco organized what became known as the Green March, 350,000 Moroccan civilians, carrying Moroccan flags and copies of the Quran, walking into Western Sahara. It was a masterstroke of political theater. Morocco was claiming the territory through the presence of its people, not just its army. The indigenous people of Western Sahara, the Sahrawis, resisted. Their resistance movement, the Polisario Front, declared the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. They were backed by Algeria. A guerrilla war followed. In 1991, the UN brokered a ceasefire. The deal included a promise, a referendum on self-determination. The Sahrawi people would vote on whether Western Sahara would be independent or integrated into Morocco. The referendum has never happened. Every time it approaches, every time a date is discussed, every time voter eligibility is debated, negotiations collapse. Morocco controls roughly 80% of the territory and has invested heavily in it, building roads, cities, infrastructure. It has no interest in a referendum it might lose. Algeria backs Polisario and has no interest in a settlement that doesn't include genuine self-determination. Meanwhile, as of the UN Refugee Agency's 2022 figures, approximately 173,600 Sahrawis remain registered as refugees in camps near Tindouf in Algeria. Some have been there since 1976. There are people in those camps who have never lived anywhere else. Who were born in a tent, raised in a tent, who may grow old in a tent, waiting for a vote that keeps not happening. The Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic is recognized by 84 UN member states, making it one of the more widely recognized unrecognized states. It has a permanent observer status at the African Union. It sends delegations to international conferences. It issues passports. But Sahrawi passport holders face severe travel restrictions. The document is recognized by far fewer countries than the 84 that recognize the SADR. And the referendum, the promised mechanism of self-determination, remains, in the diplomatic language, indefinitely delayed. Indefinitely delayed. Two words that contain decades of lives. June 17, 2008. The province of Kosovo, in the southern Balkans, declared independence from Serbia. It wasn't the first time it had tried. Kosovo's political leadership had been demanding independence for years, arguing that after the Serbian government's systematic campaign of ethnic cleansing against Kosovo's Albanian majority in the late 1990s, documented in devastating detail by international observers, prompting a NATO bombing campaign in 1999, they could not remain inside Serbia. Ibrahim Rugova, the man sometimes called the Gandhi of the Balkans, had built an entire parallel state inside Kosovo during the 1990s. While Serbia technically governed, Rugova's Democratic League of Kosovo ran underground schools, collected informal taxes, maintained a shadow government. It was, by any measure, a state operating in secret, preparing for the moment it could operate in the open. That moment came. Kosovo declared independence. The United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, the major Western powers, recognized it immediately. But Russia and China did not. And at the UN Security Council, both Russia and China hold veto power over membership decisions. Kosovo applied for UN membership. Russia and China vetoed it. Kosovo today is recognized by 101 UN member states. It has diplomatic relations with the United States and most of Western Europe. It is in the process of applying for EU and NATO membership. But it is not a UN member. And 5 EU members, Spain, Slovakia, Romania, Greece, and Cyprus, still don't recognize it, which complicates the EU path significantly. The deeper consequence of Kosovo's declaration came 2 years later. On July 22, 2010, the International Court of Justice, the UN's highest judicial body, issued an advisory opinion on whether Kosovo's declaration of independence violated international law. The court's answer, no. Declaring independence, the court said, is not in itself illegal under international law. There is no general prohibition on declarations of independence. The ruling did not say that Kosovo deserved recognition, or that any territory that declared independence had the right to be recognized. It was narrower than that. But its implications spread immediately. Russia cited Kosovo immediately. If the West could recognize Kosovo's unilateral declaration of independence, Russia argued, then Russia could recognize South Ossetia and Abkhazia, 2 breakaway regions of Georgia that Russia had just invaded to defend in August 2008. China cited Kosovo in discussions about Taiwan, not in favor of Taiwanese independence, but as evidence that Western recognition decisions are politically motivated, not legally principled. Spain cited Kosovo as a reason not to recognize it, because Madrid feared the precedent for Catalonia. The same legal opinion was used to support completely opposite positions. Which tells you something important about how international law actually works. It's less a code of rules than a vocabulary that powerful actors use to justify what they were going to do anyway. There is one entity that doesn't fit neatly into any of these categories. Not a frozen conflict, exactly. Not an unrecognized liberation movement, exactly. Not a failed state that declared itself, nothing like that. Taiwan. The island of Taiwan has been governed separately from mainland China since 1949, when Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist government, defeated in the Chinese Civil War by Mao Zedong's communists, retreated there with around 2 million soldiers and civilians. The People's Republic of China was proclaimed on the mainland. The Republic of China, the nationalist government, persisted on Taiwan. For decades, the international community was divided over which China was the real one. The Republic of China held China's UN seat, including its permanent seat on the Security Council, until 1971. Then the General Assembly voted to expel the ROC and seat the PRC. The United States shifted recognition from Taipei to Beijing in 1979. But Washington didn't abandon Taiwan entirely. The Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, a law, not a treaty, established that the United States would maintain unofficial relations with Taiwan and provide it with defensive arms. It deliberately used careful language that neither confirmed nor denied Taiwanese sovereignty. Today, Taiwan, formerly the Republic of China, has a population of 23 million people. It has its own military, its own constitution, its own currency, its own government, its own democratic elections. It is, by every functional measure, an independent country. It is recognized by 12 UN member states as of 2024, down from 30 as recently as 2000, a decline driven by the People's Republic of China's persistent diplomatic campaign to isolate Taiwan internationally, often using economic incentives to persuade small countries to switch recognition. The question of Taiwan's status is not abstract. It is the most geopolitically consequential unresolved stated question on Earth. The People's Republic of China considers Taiwan a breakaway province and has never renounced the use of force to reunify it. The United States considers Taiwan's security important enough to sell it weapons and station naval assets in the region, without formally recognizing Taiwan as a state. It is a situation of carefully maintained ambiguity. The ambiguity is, arguably, the strategy. Making the situation too clear in either direction would force a confrontation. But ambiguity has a cost. It means Taiwan's 23 million people live under a permanent political question mark, their international status held hostage to the balance of power between two superpowers. Step back for a moment. Because we've been talking about recognition as if it's simply about pride, about the satisfaction of being called a country. But what recognition actually does is more concrete, and in some ways more brutal. Recognition is access. When a state is recognized by other states, it can join international organizations. The World Health Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization. These bodies set the rules of international travel, trade, health response, financial assistance. If you're not in them, you are, by default, outside the systems they create. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Taiwan, not a WHO member, had to fight for access to information and resources that member states received as a matter of course. It eventually managed, through bilateral relationships and informal channels, but the obstacle was real. Somaliland cannot sign trade agreements. It cannot negotiate directly with international financial institutions. Development aid that flows through recognized government channels often can't reach it through official routes. International airlines rarely serve it. Shipping companies face complications. Foreign investors hesitate, because contracts signed with an unrecognized government exist in a legal gray zone. And then there are the passports. Somaliland passport holders face severe travel restrictions. Their document is not accepted by most of the world. This is not a minor inconvenience. It means a Somalilander who wants to travel for business, education, medical care, or family visits faces barriers that citizens of recognized states don't face at all. Northern Cyprus residents can travel on Turkish passports, which helps, but creates its own complications at borders of countries that are in diplomatic conflict with Turkey, which includes much of the EU in certain periods. Citizens of these territories are caught in what is sometimes called the passport trap. Their government issued them a document. The document says they are citizens of a real place. But the world refuses to honor it. They are, in a technical sense, documented. And simultaneously, for most of the world, undocumented. This is not an abstraction. It is the daily reality of tens of millions of people. Here's where it gets darker. These territories, unrecognized, frozen, ambiguous, are not just diplomatic anomalies. They are instruments. After the Cold War ended, it became clear that some of the unrecognized states in the former Soviet space had been allowed to persist not despite being unresolved, but because of it. A frozen conflict inside a neighboring country is extraordinarily useful to a great power. It means the neighboring country cannot fully stabilize, cannot fully integrate into Western alliances, cannot move forward. Russia's recognition of South Ossetia and Abkhazia after the 2008 war with Georgia was the most explicit demonstration of this logic. Both territories had been de facto independent from Georgia for years. Russia's recognition didn't meaningfully change their situation on the ground. They were already functioning as separate entities. What it changed was the message. The message was, we can activate this whenever we want. We can take what was frozen and make it real. We can redraw the map. The subsequent events in Ukraine, the annexation of Crimea in 2014, the support for breakaway entities in eastern Ukraine, and finally the full-scale invasion of 2022, followed a similar logic. Contested territories as leverage. Unrecognized entities as instruments. The map as a weapon. This is why the question of unrecognized states is not merely a legal curiosity. It is a live geopolitical issue. Every unrecognized territory is a potential flashpoint. Every frozen conflict can thaw. Every blank on the map is a place where the rules of the international order are already not fully applying, and where, therefore, the rules can more easily be broken further. Not every story ends in freezing or in erasure. In 1993, Eritrea became independent from Ethiopia, following a 30-year liberation war, one of the longest independence struggles of the 20th century. Isaias Afwerki, who had led the Eritrean People's Liberation Front through decades of guerrilla warfare, watched as his country held a referendum. 99.8% voted for independence. The following year, Eritrea took its seat at the United Nations. Eritrea made it. It crossed the line from unrecognized liberation movement to recognized sovereign state. Kosovo, despite its complicated status, has diplomatic relations with over 100 countries. Its people can travel on Kosovar passports to the EU and the United States. It participates in international sporting competitions under its own flag, a small thing, perhaps, but not nothing, when your flag is finally allowed to fly. And even Somaliland, still unrecognized, has made quiet progress. In January 2024, Ethiopia signed a memorandum of understanding that appeared to move toward recognizing Somaliland in exchange for access to a Red Sea port, a development that sent shockwaves through the region. Neighboring Somalia objected furiously. The diplomatic situation remained fluid, disputed, sensitive. But the memo existed. The conversation was happening. Recognition is not always permanent in either direction. Countries that were once recognized lose recognitions. Countries that seemed frozen begin to move. The map is more fluid than it looks. Here is what all of these stories, taken together, reveal. The international system of recognized states is not a description of the world as it is. It is a description of the world as powerful states have agreed to acknowledge it. And that agreement, the post-1945 Westphalian consensus built into the United Nations, was always more political than legal. It was a framework designed to preserve stability above all, to prevent the catastrophic wars that had twice in 30 years consumed the industrial world. That framework has costs. The cost is paid by populations who fall outside it. Peoples whose historical claims are inconvenient. Communities whose borders were drawn by other people in other cities for other reasons. Minorities whose languages and cultures were split across frontiers, or lumped together against their will, by empires that no longer exist. The legal philosopher James Crawford, whose work on the creation of states remains the definitive academic reference, wrote that statehood under international law is a matter of fact, but recognition is a matter of politics. A state can exist factually while being denied politically. And in a world where political denial has very real consequences, in trade, in travel, in health, in development, in security, the distinction matters enormously. Pull back from all of this. Hold all these territories in your mind at once. Somaliland, Kosovo, Northern Cyprus, Taiwan, Western Sahara, South Ossetia, Transnistria, Nagorno-Karabakh, gone now, absorbed, its people scattered. What do these places tell us? They tell us that maps are not facts. Maps are arguments. Every map makes a claim about which entities count and which don't, about which borders are real and which are fictions. When a map leaves Somaliland blank, it is not being neutral, it is taking a side. The side of the existing recognized order against the claims of the people who live there. They tell us that the post-war international order, for all its achievements, and it has real achievements, Decades without major wars between great powers, global trade and development on a scale previously unimaginable, contains within it an unresolved contradiction. The right of peoples to determine their own futures sits in permanent tension with the right of existing states to keep their territory. That tension doesn't go away. It produces these territories, these frozen conflicts, these legal gray zones. And they tell us something about power. About who decides. About the difference between the law as written and the law as practiced. In theory, international law is neutral. In practice, it bends toward those with the leverage to make it bend. Kosovo got recognition because the United States and Western Europe wanted it to. South Ossetia got recognition because Russia wanted it to. Somaliland gets nothing because recognizing it would upset a regional order that serves the interests of states that matter more than Somaliland does. Tens of millions of people are living the consequences of those choices right now. The airports where their passports are handed back. The organizations they can't join. The treaties they can't sign. The recognition they can't obtain. They exist. Completely, entirely, undeniably. Their children go to school, their governments collect taxes, their flags fly above their capitals. They are just not on the map. And what the map refuses to show, it refuses to protect. For more stories like this, subscribe, like and share to help others find this video. Comment your thought on these countries and let us know the ones that got you thinking.